Namaskar, Nileshok, in another episode. This is going to be interesting. We are going through different questions asked by one Mr. NB, and I like to think he has opened a can of worms. Okay, let's get into the presentation. In the previous episode, or rather episodes related to this email of Mr. NB, we looked at the planetary evidence, Venus, Mars, and Mercury present together on the last and the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. Bhrugusuno Dharaputro Shashi Jena Samanvito. Then we also looked at the retrograde motion of Venus near Nakshatra Purvabhadrapada. This is also a very succinct, clear evidence from the Mahabharata text, and that is at the time of Mahabharata war, which is to say the closest retrograde motion of Venus either before the war or after the war. And keep in mind, Venus goes retrograde approximately about every 2 years, like every 18 months. Okay? So either the one before or the one after must be near the Purva Bhadrapada. Okay, that is that Shukram Proshtapade Purve Samaruya Vishampate Uttaretu Parikramya Sahita Pratyudikshite. And I said NB has asked question related to Mars retrograde motion, and I had objected to the validation claimed by Sri Vedvir Aryaji, and I said it's a big subject and must be done in a separate episode. Frankly, I think it requires series of episodes, but I am going to make it short, one episode, or maybe a long one episode. Let's see how it goes. These things that I am doing here and recording them in YouTube format, my intention is to create this research bank, or create this as an education bank for all existing and all future Mahabharata dating researchers, Mahabharata enthusiasts, Mahabharata educators, or educators of Indian knowledge system. This should provide as a bank for, you can consider this as a case study bank, as an analysis bank, as it relates to dating of Mahabharata specifically, but in general as to how the scientific method or our Darshana Shastra method is employed or ought to be employed, and how many times it is misemployed or mismanaged. Okay, deliberately mismanaged at times, innocently mismanaged at other times, out of ignorance or out of incompetence. The reasons can be many, but when it is wrong, and it must be pointed out. So let's get into the note from Mr. NB, and let's see, what did I do here. Okay, I have to go back here. Okay, and I read this before. Okay, so while you showed some discrepancy, NB is saying to me, for Mars retrograde near Chitra Swati for the year 3162 BCE claimed by Sri Vedvir Aryaji, and I don't have to read the next one because I have done this in another episode. What I did is I pointed out a discrepancy where Vedvir Aryaji claimed a validation of Mars retrograde motion near Chitra and Swati. You can go back and watch this debate between me and Sri Vedvir Aryaji at HyperQuest, conducted by Vishal Chaurasiaji. You may have to watch this multiple times if you are truly into it. Okay, that's your call. But this is not to be taken lightly, any of this. Now, if you listen to that episode carefully, I did say that I am willing to give Sri Vedvir Aryaji a benefit of doubt. But a benefit of doubt can only last as long as there is a two-way street. Okay, the courtesy is extended and the falsehood is not deliberately propagated. But one more thing, the benefit of doubt lasts if the error that is being made is out of innocence and even possibly sometime out of incompetence. But if it's driven by a deliberate agenda, then the benefit of doubt should not be offered and it should not be kept that way. Okay, so we will have some discussion of this. And I like to think Mr. NB as frankly opened a can of worms. I would say a welcome can of worms, because this kind of samudra manthan, this kind of synthesis is much required. And in the absence of a good context, such as a decent and a great debate that Sri Vedvir Aryaji and I had at HyperQuest, provides a good support for this. Let me just look at this. All right. So I was saying that Mr. NB, it appears, has opened a welcome can of worms, and we are going to analyze these different worms. Okay, so let's begin. In preparing for this episode related to the Mars retrograde near Chitra and Swati, I again had to go back to this paper that written by Vedvir Aryaji that NB sent it to me. And so in preparation for this, I was reading certain portions, and I ran into this worm here, where Vedvirji says eclipses as primary evidence. Let's read that. This is a bit of a digression, but not really, because this is very relevant as we analyze this evidence. Okay. Vedvirji writes, the eclipse observations documented in the Mahabharata serve as the primary evidence for establishing the absolute date of the Mahabharata war. Before even reading the rest of the write up here, and of course I have read it, let me just make a comment. The eclipse observations documented in the Mahabharata serve as the primary evidence for establishing the absolute date of the Mahabharata war. Well, is it a primary evidence? Of course, it is a primary evidence because it is occurring in the Mahabharata text itself. But is it the primary evidence for establishing the absolute date of the Mahabharata war? I am asserting the answer is decisively no. What is the reason? I will do another episode on this. Many other Mahabharata dating researchers have talked about this, and that has to do with our ability to determine the precise timing, the precise nature of eclipses, either a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse, and that has to do with many factors, but one of the key factors is the motion of the moon. And for either of the eclipses, the position and the movement of the moon is crucial. Okay, so absolute date of Mahabharata war essential or the eclipse can determine? The answer is decisively no. Okay, so I'm just putting my assertion there. Assertion means it's backed by evidence, because frankly, somebody who is a novice to astronomy, like when they go and take some astronomy class, Like many of the astronomy teachers will sort of wow them with eclipses, predicting eclipses. What is the eclipse? Why there is no eclipse on every Amavasya and every Purnima and so on. But somebody who even has a decent understanding of astronomy knows couple of things. First thing, our inability to precisely determine the timing and the nature of an eclipse, especially once we go back, say 2000, 3000, 4000 and beyond, those many years in the past, again has to do with the complexity related to the position and the movement of the moon. But they know something else, that if you go back thousands and thousands of years in the past, or if you are looking for a specific historical event in the span of thousands of years in the past in antiquity with really no good idea, or sometimes maybe even a good idea, as to where exactly to locate the event, guess what? The number of eclipses that can be observed are dime a dozen. At a minimum, every year we observe 2 eclipses, okay, around the world. Now, where exactly they would be seen, how long, the nature of eclipse, that changes, and as I said, that is the most difficult thing to determine as we go in the past. But there are at least 2 eclipses. I said at least. So 2 eclipses a year, and suppose you are looking through 1000 years time span, we are immediately looking at 2000 eclipses. So let no one fool you by stating that the eclipse evidence becomes the determining evidence for the absolute date of any historical event, in this case Mahabharata war. That is unacceptable, that is foolish, that is baseless. It's not based on science, it's not based on logic, it's not based on Vijnana Buddhi, it's not based on a Tarka Shastra. And this is not an opinion, this is an assertion. Let's continue. And therefore I said, Mr. NB might have opened a can of worms, and a welcome can of worms. Okay. Regardless of other evidence, Sri Vedviraryaji says, reconciling the eclipse data is essential for dating the Mahabharata era. I will partially agree with that, which is to say, reconciling the eclipse data is essential for dating the Mahabharata war, because there is eclipse evidence in the context of Mahabharata war. So yes. But Vedvirji says, regardless of other evidence, I would say absolutely not. And therefore, maybe we need to do another episode. Therefore, before even we get into any of this rambling discussion, we have to ask, what is a given researcher's theory? What is the statement of a theory? Because as soon as they make their statement, and therefore 99.99% of the Mahabharata dating researchers do not dare put forward their statement of their theory. Now, since I'm insisting that they must do it for last 15 plus years, some people just do a lip service. Okay, there are few others, and Vedviraryaji is one of them. But if you look at their so-called statement of a theory, you will realize either they are doing this deliberately, either they are doing it out of incompetence, innocence. But one thing is very clear, the kind of statement they are putting forward as a statement of a theory, what is obvious, deliberate or otherwise, is that that particular statement basically can come from only someone who either does not have it or chooses to deliberately ignore the basic sense of scientific acumen, Vijnana Buddhi. Because there are some simple norms about the statement of a theory. I'll just say this and move on, and maybe do a separate episode on this. Okay, but the point is, yes, if the data exists, we have to test it for your claim. Now, that particular evidence may corroborate your date, may not corroborate your date. That's a different matter, and something like as simple tool as truth likeness score can take care of that. At some point, we will also discuss the degree of testability, the degree of corroboration, the degree of falsifiability. We'll discuss those terms. But even if we exclude this for this simple discussion, a truth likeness score can take care of that. So, yes, it is essential that you test the evidence if it exists, such as eclipse evidence, but regardless of other evidence, that is not true. If eclipse evidence exists, we have to test it. If other additional evidence exists and that falls under the purview of a theory, then one must test it. It is essential that the person test that evidence, as much as for the eclipse, for the planets, for the comets, for the stars, for the tithis, for the lunar months, for the chronological numbering, chronological calculations. There is no excuse to avoid anything if it falls within the purview of a theory. Therefore, Einstein beautifully said this: it is the theory that decides what can be observed. Now, this is a double-edged sword, okay? Kshurasya dhara nishita duratyaya. The theory decides what can be observed. The point is, once theory tells you what can be observed, you must observe it, you must include it, you must objectively test it, and put forward your corroboration or lack of corroboration, and including falsification. Okay, let's move on. The subsequent analysis of the eclipse data confirms that only the year 3162 BC qualifies as the year of the Mahabharata war. None of this can be I don't know what to say. This is absolutely wrong statement, okay? Disqualified, decisively false statements, okay? But let's move on. Now, what I was actually looking for is this description because of the Mars retrograde near Chitra and Swati. And I wanted to see what Vedvirji has said in his analysis of the planetary data about the Mars retrograde. Okay, by the way, as I said, this is opening can of worms. Actually, I would do a PurvaPaksha on that eclipse evidence that I just briefly described, but also this planetary evidence. There is just so much to say, okay, and I even don't know where to begin, and we may already digress from the Mars retrograde. So what I'm going to do is just mention few things, because I cannot go any further without mentioning them. For example, in the Saturn section, he refers to the evidence. By the way, he has not done this kind of evidence analysis before, when he initially essentially proposed the same date as Kota Venkatachalamji, like 3138 BCE, and I have notes from those days, maybe say 10 years ago. Then when people ask him, including myself, but even others, like, okay, so what's the big deal? Like Sri Kota Venkatachalamji, as far back as in 1950s, so that's like what, 75 years ago, has already proposed 3138 BCE. You are saying the same thing. What is it that you have done different or brought some additional evidence beyond what Kota Venkatachalamji has done? And this is the question that other people ask, I ask to Vedvir Aryaji through different forums. And as a result of it, or at least I would like to think as a result of it, he just went into some other analysis and altogether came up with a different date, that is that 3162 BCE. Be it as it may, let's get into the... So he did not discuss this evidence before at all when he initially proposed 3138 BCE. And that's actually consistent in the sense that Kota Venkatachalamji has not discussed that evidence. And I already discussed in previous episodes as to how Kota Venkatachalamji arrived at that 3138 BCE, so I will not repeat. So in Saturn, he is saying the occultation of Rohini by Saturn. No, that's not correct translation. Again, in a detailed PurvaPaksha of this particular page, including the eclipse evidence, I will go into much detail. But the word there that is used is pida. Okay, Prajapatyam cha nakshatra grahat tikshna mahadyuti shanaishchara pidayati pidayan pranikodikam. Okay, or Rohini pidayannesha sthito raja shanaishchare. Okay, so the word used is a pida. Okay, and so, well, are you going to translate that as occultation? Fine, but then be consistent. For example, the next one he says Saturn was retrograde near Bhaga Nakshatra or Bhagya Nakshatra, and then he says that's Purva Falguni. Well, that itself is also not 100% truth, but even before going to Purva Falguni, let me make a comment. He has written or translated Saturn was retrograde near Bhaga Nakshatra. Does Mahabharata explicitly refers to retrograde? The answer is no. It indirectly refers to retrograde near Bhaga Nakshatra. Well, that's not a surprise, guys. Wherever Saturn is, and if you are going to observe this for say 1 year time period, Saturn is going to go retrograde. Saturn is Shanai Shanai, Shaneshchara. It is a slow moving planet, and every year for few months it goes retrograde. So what does it mean? In every nakshatra it's going to go retrograde. Guys, that's not a news. So what's the big deal Saturn going retrograde near Bhaga Nakshatra? If it is true, and indeed it went retrograde in a Bhaga Nakshatra, guess what? Saturn must be at the point of Bhaga Nakshatra. Now, surprise, surprise, that is not at all the case for the year 3162 BCE. And Saturn is such a planet that you cannot just in a jugaad fashion pull from one place and put it in another place. Okay, if I remember, maybe not in this episode, another episode, I'll show you what was the position of Saturn in the year 3162 BCE. It is nowhere close to Bhaga Nakshatra. Now Bhaga is a Devata. So where does he come with this retrograde? And why does he do it? Well, only God knows, and he knows. But let me tell you, actually there is an indirect mention of retrograde. Okay, for example, Shveto grahastata Chitra samati kramya tishtati. Okay, now what is a Shveto graha? We will discuss that another time. So in that sense it is there. There is another reference which is the direct reference to Bhaga Nakshatra. Bhagam Nakshatra Akramya Surya Putrena Pidate. But in this particular reference, there are two things. One is Akramya, that is by coming near, and another one is a Pidate. Now, Pida you can translate in one particular way, just like say afflicting or torturing, and you can choose your word. So Akramya tells you that actually Saturn was near Bhaga Nakshatra. Okay, but by itself it doesn't tell you there was a retrograde motion. We can only surmise it, we can only infer it, because whichever nakshatra the Saturn is going to go retrograde. But does Mahabharata directly say it? Answer is no. Indirectly it comes through a very offbeat reference like Shveto grastata Chitra samati kramya tishtati, and it refers to Chitra nakshatra and not the Bhaga nakshatra. But then Vedvirji has also created another mild problem by calling Bhaga nakshatra means Purva Falguni nakshatra. This is very interesting. Now, do we find references for Bhaga as a nakshatra devata for Purva Falguni? The answer is yes. But is that the only pair or coincident pair? The answer is absolutely not. The Bhaga Devata is also mentioned in multiple places in our ancient Indian literature as the Nakshatra Devata for Nakshatra Uttara Falguni, not just Purva Falguni. So why does Vedvir Aryaji mentions only Purva Falguni? Okay, to give him a benefit of doubt, one reason could be just he pulled one reference, and I'll show you on the next page a reference such as what I'm going to show you, and he just quickly looked at it and saw, okay, Purva Falguni and Nakshatra Devata is Bhaga. Does such information exist? It does. But what is interesting is after saying this, he has to face this reality that Saturn is nowhere near Purva Falguni Nakshatra. So why would he say Purva Falguni Nakshatra and not Uttara Falguni Nakshatra? I like to assert, because I have shown that Saturn is indeed near Uttara Falguni Nakshatra at the time of Mahabharata war. So a casual and careless and a novice reader would simply say, Purva Falguni, well, Vedvira Reji cannot show for his claimed year 3162 BC, but guess what? Nobody else can show it too. Well, that's not the case. Actually, I have shown that Saturn was indeed near Uttara Falguni Nakshatra, and there are enough references in our Indian literature to show that Bhaga was a Nakshatra Devata of Uttara Falguni Nakshatra, which I'll show you on the next page. This just gives you an idea how much of a meticulous details we have to go to actually find some of the tricks, some of the deliberate jugaad, okay, that is been created by Mahabharata dating researchers. The next one, I mean, God, I mean, how can I go further? Saturn in Vishakha Nakshatra. Now, is it just simply saying Saturn is in Vishakha Nakshatra? By the way, Vedvira Reji cannot show Saturn in Vishakha Nakshatra at the time of the Mahabharata war. At least we must give him a credit. He did not do it initially when he proposed 3138 BCE, but eventually when he went on to propose 3162 BCE, as in this paper that Mr. NB sent me, yes, he mentions it. And that itself is even something worth mentioning, because many Mahabharata dating researchers are so scared of people finding out how incompetent these individuals are and how much of a fraud, outright fraud, they have created to hide their incompetence. Not only that, but deliberately push their atrociously nonsensical, unscientific, illogical date on common Hindus, common Indians. So I'm giving a credit to Vedvira Reji that at least he's mentioning this evidence. Okay, so Saturn in Vishakha Nakshatra. Now, is this just simply saying Saturn is near Vishakha Nakshatra? No, that's not what it is saying. The reference says Samvatsara Sthainancho Graha Prajvalito Ubho Vishakhayo Samipasto Brahaspati Shanascharo. This evidence must be maintained in the context. I mean, you can show this with Saturn, you can also show this with Jupiter, but without removing the context for these two planets together, then and only then you can understand the importance of this verse for the dating of Mahabharata. So what is said, this Saturn and Jupiter are in the vicinity. Samvatsara Sthainancho Graho Prajvalito Bhubho Vishakhayo Samipasto. In the vicinity of Vishakha, shining brightly for up to a year. So don't just say Saturn in Vishakha Nakshatra. Actually, it is there for a year. It is shining brightly and in the company or in the context of Jupiter. Okay, so you see that. Next, go to next, and you see Jupiter is also in Vishakha Nakshatra. Note down the verse number, Bhishma Parva 3.25. It is the exactly same reference for Saturn and Jupiter, and rightfully so. But you cannot separate this by removing the context. Somewhere I think even Vedvira Reji said, when the two planets are mentioned, we can look at that evidence as a secondary evidence. That is incorrect. In fact, when a evidence shows multiple facets that one has to validate, actually it becomes a crucial evidence, it becomes an extremely critical evidence, powerful evidence, and that becomes in a Mahatva Mapan or Taratamya, in the sense of the elements of Vijnana Buddhi, scientific acumen, the gradation. It actually gets a higher weightage, not lower. But that's what Vedvir Aryaji is trying to convince people. That is wrong. Okay, Jupiter was retrograde in Shravana Nakshatra. Now here is another game he is playing. Guys, you know what is happening? I said I will do a separate episode on the PurvaPaksha of this, but I am forced to do it. Even I cannot go further and show you the Mars retrograde near Chitra, Swati. It will be the subtleties and the nuances will be lost if you don't understand this. Okay, so Jupiter was retrograde in Shravana Nakshatra because Mars, also has that connection. This is not a stand-alone observation, guys. Just like Jupiter and Saturn near Vishakha is not a stand-alone observation, same is the case with Jupiter going retrograde in Shravana Nakshatra. Notice this Bhishma Parva 3.13. Let me quickly take you to the Mars evidence, and there should be something similar for here. Mars was in retrograde in Magha Nakshatra. Note down the reference number. It is Bhishma Parva, exactly same, 3.13. Do you know why? Just like I said, the description of Saturn and Jupiter is given together. Here also, the descriptions of Mars and Mars and Jupiter is given together. It says Magha Swangarako Vakra Shravanecha Brahaspati. Mars went Vakra near Magha, and and Jupiter went Vakra near Shravan. You cannot split them out. Yes, you can mention this in Jupiter, but mention it along with the Mars, and you can mention it again in Mars, but mention it along with Jupiter. Okay. Now, what is the word that is used? You think, guys, I mean, if you are just an ordinary listener of this my podcast, then this may be boring, possibly irritating to you. Well, I will not force you to watch this, but those who are researchers, or those who want to become researchers of a Mahabharata in general, Ramayana, but any scientific tough problem, any problem that you want to address using science, you may want to pay attention to this. Anyone who wants to study Nyaya Darshana, anyone who has already studied Nyaya Darshana may want to pay attention to this. You can find series of fallacies, series of futilities, series of errors, and series of multiple points of nigrasthana, okay, the failures, and therefore defeat. This might have happened out of incompetence, this might have happened out of ignorance, but do not discount the possibility that this is been done deliberately to hide their errors. I am only discussing Sri Vedvir Aryaji's analysis, but I have done this analysis for practically every living Mahabharata dating researcher and those who are not around with us, and I find these same issues. This is how pathetic our state of research is, guys. Okay, all right. So what is the word that is being used when Jupiter is described as going retrograde near Shravan Nakshatra and Mars is described as going retrograde near Magha Nakshatra? The word that Vedvirji is translating as retrograde is the word Vakra. Now, in modern times, we translate, in the Indian astronomy context, we do translate the word Vakra as a retrograde. I am asserting meaning is backed by evidence. There is a sufficient proof, more than sufficient proof, that the Vakra of Mahabharata, it comes 3 times, and then once it comes in Hari Vansha, so total of 4 times if you want to consider Mahabharata as the entire Grantha, including the appendix, the Khila Parva Hari Vansha, 4 instances, and in all 4 instances it refers to something else and not retrograde. Okay, but the fun is just beginning. Now, then he is referring to Jupiter in Rohini Nakshatra. Again, that is a wrong translation. For example, at the top, Vedvirji translated Rohini by Saturn as an occultation. When the word Pida was used, he translated that as an occultation. Okay, I mean, there is no good translation. So if you want to use occultation, fine, but be consistent. This is where another principle, actually it's not even a principle, it's such a common sense basic understanding in the science, the element of consistency. So if you translated Pida there as occultation, why not translate Karana Parva 95.51 as a occultation? Because there also it says Brahaspati Rohini Samprapidya Babhuva Chandraarka Samana Varna. Okay, again the word that is used is a Pida, Jupiter in Rohini Nakshatra. And by Jupiter in Rohini Nakshatra, if Vedvirji means that Jupiter was in a Rohini Nakshatra, hey, be my guest. In reality, he cannot show Jupiter anywhere close to Rohini Nakshatra. Okay? So, I mean, he's translating in such way, but then I hope in his paper, I will go and check it. Somewhere he admits that, look guys, this is all the evidence of Mahabharata, and none of it matches for my year 3162 BCE. I hope he has written it somewhere. Okay, let's move on, which is the Mars part. Now, I talked about this Mars was in retrograde already, the Vakra, and it's not to be taken as a retrograde, but let's continue. Mars completed its retrograde motion near Chitra and Swati. Aha! Now, let me tell you this. Until I proposed in 2011, because when that's the first time it became a public knowledge that Dhruvam Prajvalitam Goram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantare Chaiva Dishtitah Purushagra is a signature description of Mars going retrograde between Chitra and Swati. Nobody, and I mean nobody, exception none, has proposed retrograde Mars near Chitra and Swati. Now, so obviously Vedvirji is borrowing it from me and I have no problem whatsoever. In fact, that is to be welcome. Okay, I mean, remember I mentioned with the 18th day evidence of 3 planets together, Venus, Mars and Mercury. And with Vedvirji's knowledge of Sanskrit, which I don't have as much as him, he actually pointed out during our debate that look, Mars and Venus are together. So it's like Mars dash Venus, and this is how one of my friend who is a PhD in Sanskrit kind of explained it to me. So Bhrugu Suno Dhara Putro Shashi Jena Samanvito. Think of this as Mars Venus kind of together, along with but also Mercury, who are together seen in the sky or something of that effect. Now, I had shown these all 3 together in the sense of same part of the sky and could be seen after sunset or before sunrise, in this case after sunset. So they could be seen all together, not necessarily next to each other. And I consider that as a sufficient corroboration. But during our debate, actually Vedvirji added additional nuance based on the Sanskrit words and I don't know if I'm using the right word, what you say, the vibhakti, or also the singular versus dual, so ubhav, like that. And I'm thankful to him because I already knew the positions and I say, wow, that's even better. That's even a better corroboration of the evidence that I have shown for 5561 BCE, specifically 2nd November 5561 BCE, the last and 18th day of the war. And I am asserting, at least based on my limited evidence, if somebody else finds another claim which can also show this for the 18th day of the war, I will be very happy to take this claim back in the sense that I am not the only one. But based on my current knowledge, I'll say I am the only one, namely 5561 BC is the only year. So that does include Dr. P.V. Vartak, but he had not explained it that way. But yes, it is true for what he claimed. Essentially, he claimed the same thing, but based on a different evidence. That the way Vedvirji translated, and it was validated by my friend who has a PhD in Sanskrit. Actually, there is only one year, 5561 BCE, where this evidence matches. So my point is, the retrograde motion of Mars near Chitra and Swati is been taken by Vedvirji from my interpretation, and I don't see anything wrong with it. Actually, it's welcome, just like I took his interpretation and frankly showed how beautifully it fits for only 5561 BCE. But some issue there. The issue I want to bring is notice how Vedvirji has taken Vakra to means retrograde in Bhishma Parva 3.13, Jupiter going retrograde near Shravan, Mars going retrograde near Magha Nakshatra. Now here there is no specific word Vakra in this verse. Dhruvam Prajvalitam Ghoram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantare Chaiva Dishtitah Parushagra. There is no word Vakra, but actually it is retrograde. And I'm glad he understood it and he accepted it. Whether he can show it for his year, we will see in a minute. Okay, so what is happening now? So Mars is going retrograde near Magha Nakshatra at the time of Mahabharata war. Then is it going retrograde again near Chitra and Swati? Is that what Vedvir Aryaji is saying? But we are not done. Let's just continue. I'm going to show you one more instance which Vedvirji has very cleverly avoided. Then he says, and so Swati Nakshatras, and approach Anuradha and Jeshta Nakshatra. Not true. Do you know what actually the shlok says? The shlok comes in a completely different parva. It comes into Udyoga parva. The Mars going retrograde near Chitra Swati comes in the Bhishma parva. Mars going not retrograde but Mars going Vakra, okay, near Jeshta Anuradha occurs in the Udyog Parva. Okay, Krutva Changarako Vakram Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthayate Maitram Samshayamanniva. But here he has very intelligently, deceptively translated this as and then approach Anuradha and Jeshta Nakshatra. Why did he not write by being consistent with the translation of the word Vakra equal to retrograde that he did twice before and say then they also went retrograde near Anuradha and Jeshta Nakshatra? Because in that case, you know what happens? As if Mars went retrograde 3 times in 3 different places within a very short span of the time of Mahabharata war, which is any basic student of astronomy would know it's impossible. Mars goes retrograde approximately every 2 years. So if somebody is claiming it went retrograde 3 times, we are looking at a span of 6 years. Not only that, we also have to show that yes, it went retrograde near Magha, it went retrograde near Chitra Swati, and then again it went retrograde near Anuradha Jeshta in that sequence. And still, this is not acceptable, which is to say, why did Vyasa describe 3? Why not 4? Like to balance on 2 sides of the things. But anyways, we don't have to worry about that because we will find other than Mars going retrograde near Chitra and Swati, we don't have to take any of this as a retrograde because it is not. Okay? Alright, and we'll explain why that is so. Thereafter, Vedvirji writes, Mars in Shravana went to Shravana prior to the date of Mahabharata war. That is correct. Okay? Now there, very interesting. He says Bhishma Parva 3.16. Well, that is correct. Okay. Let's see. Where does he does that? So this is bit funny. Okay, he should have given a numbering to Mars completed his retrograde motion near Chitra and Swati. Okay, yeah, he does that. Maybe he does it. Okay, yeah, 3.16, correct, he does that. And then Bhishma Parva 3.17 is where he is referring to Mars going near Shravana. True, except there is a one additional problem. Do you know what the verse says? Vakrano vakram krutvam cha Shravane pavaka prabha. Okay, after going through this Vakra and Anuvakra motions, Mars now came near Shravana. But is that it? The answer is no. It says, Vakranuvakram krutvam cha Shravane pavaka prabha Brahma Rashi samavrutta lohitango vyavastita. And then it came in the vicinity, in the area of a Shravan and aligned itself along the nakshatra Brahma Rashi. Now, if somebody doesn't know what Brahma Rashi is, then obviously the person wouldn't even realize it. I don't know if that is the case with Vedviraryaji. But Brahma Rashi, we have a mention of it in Mahabharata, we have a mention of it in Ramayana. In fact, in Ramayana times, it's a pole star. Brahma Rashir Vishuddhasya Shuddhasya Paramashya Archishmantah Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshinam. And in case of Mahabharata, it comes as Vakrano Vakram Krutvam Cha Shravane Pavaka Prabha Brahma Rashi Samavrutta Lohitango Vivastita. It is not difficult to find out who Brahma Rashi is. Well, first thing it tells us, it's somewhere in the vicinity of Nakshatra Shravan. Okay, now Brahma Rashi, it is mentioned in the context of planet Mars, so it's like in the Nakshatra. And what is that Nakshatra? It doesn't take much stretch of imagination. Look, we are looking at the Nakshatra Devatas, sometimes direct Nakshatra names, in this case Brahma Rashi. Now you may not have heard a Nakshatra with a Brahma Rashi as a name, but Brahma and which Nakshatra has a Nakshatra Devata as Brahma? The answer is very obvious. The answer is Abhijit, or in modern astronomy star Vega, and it is next to Shravana. Parashar Tantra, another grantha on Indian Astronomy also has a reference to Brahma Rashi. Again, a beautiful description, and likes of Professor R.N. Iyengar have written a commentary. I mean, we should be all thankful to it. Funny enough, not unlike many other researchers, he initially came close to understanding the correct identification of Brahma Rashi equal to Abhijit, equal to Vega, but either innocently or because realizing that I have already shown how that beautifully matches for both Ramayana and Mahabharata, and since he vehemently opposes those dates of mine, and I don't know on what basis, he even went to extreme lengths to dismiss his own uh, conjecture that Brahma Rashi is equal to Abhijit Vega when he wrote a translation and commentary of his Parashar Tantra. But that's for another time. Okay? All right. So just want to point out that Vedvirichi has not mentioned Brahma Rashi as if it doesn't exist. All right. And yes, so Udyoga Parva 141.8 reference, he refers to it, but he simply translates as approach Anuradha and Jeshta. That is not true. To be consistent with what he has written, he should have included the word retrograde. Then Mars went retrograde again near Anuradha Jeshta, because the verse says Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana. All right. Then Venus went retrograde. Again, we have already covered this, but my point is there is no word Vakra in it, and still he has taken it as a retrograde. Okay, now he had not initially come up with 3162 BCE, but I had shown in 2011 that the Venus description Shukram Proshtapade Purve Samaruya Vishampate Uttaretu Parikramya Sahita Pratyudikshite beautifully corroborates a retrograde motion of Venus near Purva Bhadrapada. So I don't know whether based on this he selected 3162 BCE, or whatever his logic, he arrived at 3162 BCE and then went on to search which of the planetary or other astronomy evidence happened to match his 3162 BCE, and maybe realized that the Venus actually does what it's supposed to do as described in the Mahabharata text. Okay, and then notice here, it's beautiful. And the next one, Venus and Mars were in conjunction on the 17th day of the Mahabharata war. Well, actually that's slightly wrong, which is to say, well, actually significantly wrong. First thing, it's not Venus and Mars. There is no word conjunction. Now, if it takes as a translates, I will give him a benefit of doubt. But actual verse is Bhrugu Suno Dharaputro Shashi Jena Samanvito. Even here in translation, which I pointed out when he did not mention Mercury during our debate, that the reason he would not mention Mercury, because why? Thank God, he understands corroboration. He knows he cannot mention Mercury because for the year 3162 BCE, the Mercury cannot be seen. Okay, with Venus and Mars. Why? Because it is on the other side of the sun. So essentially between Venus and Mars on one side and Mercury on the other side, there is sun in between. So he is aware of it. So he did not mention it until I pointed out, and then he tried to take some feeble objections, saying that, well, look, even in your case, Venus Mars is not in conjunction with Mercury. Well, he's right, except I never claimed a conjunction. Mahabharata evidence is not claiming a conjunction, but they sing together is important. And he knows it. That's why in this, when referring to Shalya Parva 11.17, and it's not on the 17th day, by the way, it is on the 18th day, but we can ignore that, just give him a benefit of doubt. But still, Mercury must have been included. And we'll ignore Mercury for now. Oh, well, let's not include, let's not ignore it, because he's mentioning retrograde there. My God. Okay, now he's saying Mercury was in retrograde in 3 nakshatras prior to the date of the Mahabharata war. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Now, can we give him a benefit of doubt? Yeah, maybe. See, for example, now I have to recall what that shlok was. Buddha, what is that? Trishu Purveshu, something like this. I'll pull it, okay? Or maybe do it in another episode. That in the three nakshatras. Now, Purveshu, you can take it to mean in the past. Okay, so he's saying like the prior to the date of the Mahabharata war. But Purveshu also means to the east of. And the question is, to the east of what? Well, if it's in the case of Mercury, that would mean east of the sun. Okay, and then now where does he get retrograde? Well, Trishu Purveshu Sarveshu Nakshatreshu Vishampate. That is the description for this Mercury. Okay, Budham Sampadyate. Now I'm not getting the verse, I don't have it in my mind right now. Trishu Purveshu Sarveshu. So Purveshu, Trishu like three, Purveshu either in the past or in the east of, not in the, to the east of, now east of sun is not mentioned. Purveshu Sarveshu Nakshatreshu Vishampate. So one translation is what he has given. But not retrograde. There is no word retrograde either as a vakra, or there is no sense of anything that will tell us, this is referring to retrograde of Mercury. So the question is, now why is he adding the word retrograde? Lo and behold, because his Mercury happens to be to the west of the sun, okay, and it had gone there after completing retrograde motion. So that is something long before the Mahabharata war. Now when I say long before, remember Mercury completes one round in 88 days. So in that relative sense, long before, not like on the first day of the Mahabharata war or 5 days before that or something like this. So therefore, because that is a fact, that is a factually the situation in 3162 BCE, so therefore to match the Mahabharata description, he is forcing this translation of Mercury going retrograde in three nakshatras prior to the date of Mahabharata war. Mercury is correct, three nakshatras is correct, and Purveshu, we can give him a benefit of doubt and say, therefore prior to this event, that also we can agree. But there is nothing that will allow anyone to translate this as retrograde. So this is, again, this is not like being harsh on Vedvir Aryaji. In fact, I am anything but harsh. Although it may sound like this, I'll show you sometime what harsh can be, because that's the kind of atrocious nonsense many other living Mahabharata dating researchers have done. Okay, and we will do that. But here I give him a credit for including as much evidence. Sometimes he has avoided, and there is much more evidence than this. In fact, there are 50 descriptions of these planets, 7 planets together 3 times, and the positions of the sun, moon, because they are also considered planets, and nakshatra and so on. But focusing on the 5 visible planets, I would say he has done a decent job, at least in including the evidence which 99% of other Mahabharata dating researchers do not dare. Moment they do it, their game will be exposed. Their game is exposed. The problem is the ordinary folks are incapable of comprehending it. Okay, with this, let's go to the Mars. Okay, and let's do that. Okay, so first what I will do is I will go through the Mars translations. Then I will walk you through the simulations for 5561 BCE, then 3163, 3162 BCE, and then we will conclude. Okay, this can be a long episode, guys, but this is something that you want to watch multiple times. I assure you, okay, you will be highly rewarded. Okay, back to this Bhaga Nakshatra, okay, and what does it refer to? Okay, in support of what Vedvir Aryaji has done, like that is translated Bhaga Nakshatra to mean Purva Falguni, I deliberately picked one. So for example, if you look at the list of Nakshatra and Nakshatra Devata from Narada Puran, for example, okay, quickly I will take you to where it is written. So refer to number 11, okay, Purva Falguni, and the Nakshatra Devata is given as Bhaga. And so, for example, he could have referred to something like Narada Puran and therefore listed Bhaga means Purva Falguni. and in that case he would be right. And Uttara Falguni, you can see the nakshatra devata is written as Aryama or sometime Aryaman, okay? And you will see this game sometime both nakshatra Purva Falguni and Uttara Falguni. I have seen these texts. Both of them, for both of them, nakshatra devata is listed as Bhaga. In other cases, for both of them, nakshatra devata is listed as Aryaman, and what you are seeing here is a third instance, and then the fourth instance is these are exchange, where for Uttara Falguni the nakshatra devata is listed as Bhaga, and for Purva Falguni it is listed as Aryaman. In one of my episode I mentioned, like, this point was taken by Dr. Jayashree Saranathanji and made a non-existent chaos, okay? Just simply saying how I have taken Uttara Falguni to mean Bhaga Nakshatra, how that is wrong. All it shows is how unaware and ignorant that she is about the various Indian text, where Uttara Falguni is also described with a Bhaga as Nakshatra Devata. I'm just going to show quickly few. And this is just, guys, I mean, how did I get this for? I simply went to Google and said nakshatra devata of Falguni nakshatra, or Bhaga as a nakshatra devata of which nakshatra, or something like that. And this is what I found. So this was like less than 2 minutes of search in Google. Okay, so here different nakshatras. Now if I click on others, then I couldn't show it, so I highlighted the Uttam nakshatra after Hasta. So you can say Chitra, Hasta, going in that direction. Sorry, let me go back. And so this is Purva Falguni here, and before that is the Uttama nakshatra, that's Uttara Falguni, Uttaram. And he says Uttara Falguni Uttama nakshatra devata is Bhaga, one of the 12 Adityas, blah blah blah. My point is, yes, there are many instances where Bhaga is listed as Nakshatra Devata Uttara Falguni. Why am I spending some time? Because majority of these Mahabharata dating researchers, and I'm glad they are nitpicking, trying their best to nitpick in my research, and I welcome that, because that's how my claim becomes robust, because it has responded to all such nitpicking objections, and every time it has become stronger because of it. So I welcome them. But the point here I want to make is just a very casual discussion will also show something, but these Mahabharata dating researchers will deliberately pull such nonsense to confuse the innocent masses. I just want to make people aware of it. For example, I don't know even what the context was, but it came into that Google search. So there is this mantra for Uttara Falguni, it says Om Cham Uttara Falguni Nakshatre Namaha, and just a brief description below. Okay, I even don't know the site, guys. You can do the Google and find out again. It says Bhaga, a god of divine bliss, leads us towards the earthly and heavenly prosperity. My point is, even there in the mantra there is nothing, but again Uttara Falguni is referred to Bhaga as a Nakshatra Devata. And see, you can, as a reference I can tell you, you can go to Taittiriya Samvita, Taittiriya Brahman, Shatapad Brahman, many other texts, Garuda Puran, many other Puranas, Bhagavad Puran, wherever you can find it. And you are going to find all the 4 combinations that I describe when it comes to Purva Falguni, Uttara Falguni. The fourth one, I thought I will try to find out from varied sources. So one from Purana, one from some random nakshatra list, third one from the mantra for each nakshatra, fourth from a Sanskrit English spoken dictionary online. You can go and do that. I typed Bhaga, okay, as in Bhaga Devata, and it has many meanings, and I have shown this in another episode, so I had remembered it. And just as a translation for a Bhaga, if you look at the number 3, it says Bhaga means Nakshatra Uttara Falguni. Okay, I think that should be enough. If that's not enough for someone, I think that person is a wrong person, coming to this kind of episodes. Okay, all right. Let's finally get into Mars retrograde during the Mahabharata war. We will do the comparison of 5561 BC versus 3163 BC. The reason is, I have asserted that the Mahabharata reference refers to Mars going retrograde between Chitra and Swati. Vedvir Aryaji has accepted that translation and has claimed that it also does the same for his claimed year, namely 3163 BC / 3162 BC. I have already described why the difference there. I will not repeat that. Go and watch my previous episodes. Okay. So now what I'm showing you here is for 5561 BCE, a static screen. I will show you the simulation in a minute. But notice this is March 4 or so 5561 BCE. That's like what? About 7 months before the timing of the Mahabharata war itself. And what you are saying is this is the nakshatra Swati, the Yoga Tara of Swati nakshatra. This is Yoga Tara of Chitra nakshatra. And this Mars is between these two, somewhere in this region. And the way it has come is it has come from here and then it has gone all the way to the end of Swati near Vishakha, has come back all the way to Chitra and then gone back. That is again a signature retrograde for Mars. Okay. Now what is the equivalent reference? The reference is here, Bhishma Parva. ध्रुवं प्रज्वलितो घोरम अपसव्य प्रवर्तते चित्रा स्वात्यंतरे चैव दिष्टितः परुष ग्रह. The next verse there is वक्रानुवक्रम कृत्वां च श्रवणे पावक प्रभा ब्रह्मराशिं समावृत्य लोहितांगो व्यवस्थितः. Now if I want to digress, guys, there are enough grounds to digression. I'll just take a small digression. You know what's many or at least some Mahabharata dating researchers have done? They have, therefore I showed this deliberately as number 4 and number 5. So if you read this number 4 independent of number 5 and do not make the connection that the same planet is being described, then do you know what people have done? They have simply taken this as a Parusha Graha. Parusha means like a evil, evil planet, a bad planet. You can take the meaning whichever you like. And okay, it's an evil planet. So what it could be? Some people have taken that to mean Mars, thankfully so, because it's actually supposed to be Mars, because there is a continuing discussion of it between 16 and verse 17. Therefore, I deliberately wrote down here number 16 and 17. But what else could be considered Parusha Graha? Well, if you look at astrology, I'm not talking astrology here at all, guys, but every Graha can be seen as a Parusha Graha. I will not go into that complexity, but even in an ordinary sense, Mars can be seen as a Purusha, Saturn can be seen as an evil planet, and Rahu and Ketu in a very simplistic way. So, and actually that's exactly what has happened. Many translators of Mahabharata text, with their immense Sanskrit knowledge, but unfortunately due to lack of astronomy knowledge, or maybe because they had no luxury of discussion back and forth that we have today, they have taken this Purusha and translated sometime as a Rahu, another time as a Ketu, some other time as a Saturn, and on, and Mars of course also. So it's important that you keep that in mind, okay? But they should be taken together and they beautifully describe it. Fortunately, at least as far as Vedvir Aryaji and myself go, at least we are on the same page that these both 16 and 17 refer to Mars, okay? And nothing wrong if somebody takes the different meaning. This is again how pathetic and idiotic many Mahabharata dating researchers have done. For example, they will fight with me or fight with themselves or God knows with who. They will take the translation of Purusha to mean like a Rahu, Ketu, Saturn, whatever, because say Gita Press does it. Okay, be my guest, guys. Now, will you please kindly show me that whatever the way the translation they accepted, Rahu, Ketu or Saturn, now don't they realize that if they are accepting that translation as correct or claiming that they have translated it that way, shouldn't they demonstrate that particular graha, Rahu, Ketu or Saturn between Chitra and Swati? This is how pathetic this area of research is, guys. They will claim something, but they do not even understand that it is the onus on them now to show that particular planet that they are claiming between Chitra and Swati, to show that that is the case for the year they are claiming. and as and when time permits, I will pull such references and show you. And again, why am I showing this? Am I trying to put others down? No, I am trying to bring the reality to this research, saying how pathetic the research has been done. But we, in a as what you call authority fallacy, like somebody is a professor, somebody has a PhD, somebody has been awarded some public I don't know appreciation, and therefore in a blindly people are saying, oh, he must be correct, she must be correct. Guys, that's not how science works. Science goes by the evidence. Science goes by consistency. Science goes by truth likeness score. Science goes by empirical testing. Okay, all right. And then there is a one other reference that also no other Mahabharata dating researchers, including Vedvirarya ji, will able to show, which is Nunam Mahadbhayam Krishna Kurunam Samupastitam Visheshenahi Varshneya Chitra Pediyate Graha. I'm not sure where or if he translated this. Well, I don't want to go back. We are going to do a PurvaPaksha of his planetary evidence translation. Actually, we did it, but we will do it with shlok, and I'll try to explain why we should not take these translations lightly. There is much more to it than, guys, what I discussed, although I took so much time. Okay, so here what I'm saying is Mars has total of 8 descriptions in the Mahabharata text in the context of a war. Okay, out of those 8, 3 are here, 4, 5 and 2, and they can be shown in the context of Mars going retrograde between Chitra and Swati. Okay, I have made a whole episode, Mars in Mahabharata, and I think it has, like, I don't know, but more than 200,000 plus views, and definitely watch that, because there I have gone through all these 8 observations. Okay, but let's go further. So out of 8, 3 can be described with this retrograde motion of Mars. Now keep this in mind, guys. About this is 3rd month and 10th, so 7 months before the Mahabharata war, Mars has gone retrograde. Now, at least for my case, okay, we'll see what happens in case of Vedvirarya ji. It doesn't happen in the case of all other existing living or otherwise Mahabharata researchers. Their Mars does not go retrograde near Chitra and Swati. So that itself is a falsification of their claim, but we'll talk more about that. But here, if you take this, so Mars has gone retrograde about 7 months before the Mahabharata war. So what am I looking for? How many more times I want it to go retrograde? It's going to take 2 more years from now, or if you go in the past, additional 2 years in the past. And why would Vyasa write about that? Well, we don't know. If Vyasa writes, we have to test it. My point is, actually, if you go to test it, the way Vedvirji has translated, you are not going to find Mars doing retrograde 3 times, first with Magha, then with Chitra Swati, and then with Anuradha Jeshta. That is not the case. Okay, and that is not what is meant, because then you are forced to do that vakra in other places. And when I do the PurvaPaksha of Vedvirarya's planetary evidence, I'll tell you all the fun that we are going to see if we accept his translation. And we don't have to even compare with somebody else. There are internal contradictions into his own translations which are going to falsify his own date without referring to 5561 BCE. But that's for another time. Okay, so we looked at 3 out of 8. Let's look at the next 2. So that would be 5 out of 8. Krutva Changarako Vakra, and you see the other side also, Magha Swangarako Vakra. And I will not go into the details. The way I translated Vakra, I said, based on my analysis, I can say that when Mahabharata says Vakra in the context of a planet, it's not referring to retrograde motion, but rather a oblique crossing of a planet across the ecliptic. So you can show that that is the case for 5561 BCE, where Mars came from north to the south, very near Anuradha Jeshta. So right now, if you see in the picture on the left side, Mars is to the south of the ecliptic, south of that yellow line. And if you see the picture on the right side, you will see now sometimes this can be confusing. You will say, that line, and in both cases Mars is to the right of it. Well, that is true, but for that reason you must understand astronomy 101, how simulations work, and then you will know that whereas in the picture on the left side, the Mars is to the south of the ecliptic, because remember the Anuradha and Jeshta Yogataras are to the south of the ecliptic, whereas the Yogatara Magha is right on the ecliptic, just like you can see, and to its right in this particular case at least, which means to the north of the ecliptic. So Mars has crossed the ecliptic, beginning with as far as like Kritika, Rohini, somewhere there, and it's a very slow crossing, and then finally it emerges to the north near Nakshatra Magha. And notice reference number 3. That's why it must be translated together. That's what I was referring to, insisting. Magha Swangarako Vakra Shravanicha Brospati. Okay, so Magha went Vakra near Angarak, meaning Mars went Vakra near Magha, and Brospati, Jupiter, went Vakra near Shravan. That's how it must be translated twice. Once when we are describing the evidence of Jupiter, once when we are describing the evidence of Mars. These, in one sentence, there are descriptions of 2 planets doing something. Vedvir Ariji considers this as a secondary evidence, which is absolutely wrong. Okay, from a scientific perspective, it's exactly the other way. When there are, because what it does is when there are 2 or more rather than just one description of a planet or whatever the thing is, it adds additional constraints on your corroboration, and that's a good thing, because the chance of falsifying a wrong date goes up, and therefore it is a primary evidence of a higher gradation, higher mahatva, higher taratamya. In your taratamya, that is the evidence you must value more and not less, as Vedvir Areji suggests. Okay, so we got now these 2, so out of 5 out of 8, and then 6, what is that, 8, so 6 and 7, well, that as the number says, these both descriptions where there is a reference to Mars occur on the first day of the war. At one place, like number 6, it says Samiyatu Susankrud Dhav Angaraka Buddha Viva. The important point is Angaraka and Buddha, okay, as if like they were coming to attack each other, or one was trying to attack the other, whichever way you want to take it. That was the war was happening as if Mars attacking the Buddha or Buddha attacking Mars on the first day of the war. And you also see number 7, essentially similar picture. Tayo samabhavat yuddham ghora rupam sudarunam, and between who? Shukra and Angaraka, between Venus and Mars. Now Venus and Mars is very obvious to see, but how do we understand Angaraka and Buddha? Well, the first simple thing is they all 3 are available in the sky on the one side of the sun, so they can be seen together, but as if like somebody coming and attacking like angry, in anger. You can possibly attach that to Mercury here. Of course, it's relative motion. So when the Mercury is actually coming towards Mars, that's almost saying Mars is coming towards Mercury. I'll not go into that relative details. But if you factually look at which planet had a faster movement at this particular time, I would say it was Mercury, and it was going away from the sun and towards Venus and Mars at a much faster rate at this time. So therefore I'm saying the analogy, the particular description can be beautifully understood in this fashion. Okay, and so there is one more, and we have already done it, so I'm not going to do this again. Fast forward from this first day, 16 October 5561 BCE, to November 2nd, 5561 BCE, the last and the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. Rugusuno Dhara Putro forgive me, that putro should be double, double matra, putro. Shashi jena samanvito, like that, samanvito, to, like that. Charamam pandu putranam purasta sarvabhubhujam. And I have already discussed this, so will not discuss this again. So these are these 8 references that we were referring to, that we just went through. And now I am going to take you through the simulation. Now the simulation is limited to only the retrograde motion of Mars between Chitra and Swati. We will begin with the year 5561 BCE, that is my research date for the year of Mahabharata war, and then we will look at the claim of Vedvir Aryaji for 3162 3163 BCE, and then we'll briefly analyze it. Okay, so let's begin. What I have done is I have locked Mars position, so as if we are going to ride on the Mars along the ecliptic. The timing is 1st January 5562 BCE. So this is what, approximately 1 year 10 months before the timing of Mahabharata war. Okay, I deliberately picked January 15562 BCE. So those people who may want to redo this analysis using astronomy software, it's easy for them to remember. Okay, so let's begin with a step change of 1 day. Right now it's 1 minute. I'm going to change it to 1 day, and let's begin. So look at this. Mars is to the south of the ecliptic right now. Okay, that the line that you see where Sun is now approaching Mars. Mars is to the south of the ecliptic. Okay. Now notice Mars is coming close to the ecliptic. Okay, I'll just keep the same magnification for now. I will change if required. Now Mars is practically on the ecliptic. This is that Vakra motion that I am asserting Mahabharata is referring to. Now Mars has already come to the right, that is to the north of the ecliptic, and I'm going to stop it here for a second. And this is that Maghaswangarako Vakra. Okay, Mars went Vakra, obliquely crossed near Nakshatra Magha. Now keep that in mind, because we are going to see one more Vakra motion of Mars, which is when Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthete, near Anuradha and Jeshtha Nakshatra. So that will hopefully bring home what is meant by oblique crossing. Okay, and why I translated Vakra to mean oblique crossing and not retrograde. Okay, all right. So let's continue. Before we look at the other Vakra motion, as in oblique crossing near Anuradha Jeshta, first we are going to go through the retrograde motion of Mars. Okay, so let's wait for that. Now Mars comes near Chitra. I am going to, okay, stop it for a second. I want to change the view so that you can also see star Swati. Okay, that's the idea. So therefore I am reducing it, and let me start again. So Mars is right now almost approaching Chitra. Okay, let's start. Now look what it does. Okay, it's coming as far as in the vicinity of Yogatara of Vishakha. Not quite, but close to it. At least visually you can think like this. It's still in the area of a Swati. Now it goes back. This is the retrograde motion, guys. Okay, now it goes back as far as Chitra, and remember, so this is Dhruvam Prajvalitam Ghoram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantare Chaiva Dishtita Parushagraha. Why Dishtita? Because essentially, so Dhruvam Prajvalitam, it has become fixed between Chitra and Swati. Do you know how long? From the time it came to Chitra, went all the way towards approaching Vishakha and turned back, and came to Chitra, and now again is going to go towards Swati and eventually get towards Vishakha. This entire time period is about 6 months. Practically for 6 months, the people at the time of Mahabharata war could see, just before war of course, could see Mars between these two nakshatra for 6 months. Now do you know how long typically Mars takes to go from one nakshatra to the other? 20 days if it's not in retrograde. So now you can understand why Vyasadeva has described this as Dhruvam Prajwalitam Ghoram. It has become fixed and it is shining scary bright. It's not easy to show it here, but if you have watched my other video films, you have seen how bright it became. Okay. And one more reference that comes from Udyoga Parva. It says, okay, I have to even think what what it says now, but it says Visheshena hi Varshneya Chitra Pidayate Graha. Okay, so after saying Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthayate Maitram Samshayamanniva, it says Nunam Mahadbhayam Krishna. This is Karna telling to Krishna. And of course, these are all nimitta. That's how they are said. Okay, these are the signs. These are the references. These are the signpost to timestamp the event of Mahabharata. Okay. So, Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthayate Maitram Samshayamanniva, that we are going to see in a minute. Nunam mad bhayam Krishna kuruna samupastitam, that's Karna is saying Visheshena hi Varshneya Chitra Pidayate Gro. Again, the word used is a pida here. Okay, so how are we going to translate that? Okay, it was afflicting, it was torturing, and can you understand how Mars is torturing Chitra? Well, as if it went by it, and as if like on a second thought it came back. Think of Chitra as a beautiful girl and Mars as a bad boy. Okay, just for this description, but to make it obvious for you guys, just came back whistling, and saying, okay, as if like torturing. Chitra Visheshena Varshneya Chitra Pidayate Graha. And then it continues. Now notice what it does. It is to the left right now, which is to the north of the ecliptic. Again, you must have a basic one-on-one astronomy to understand this. But now look what it's doing. It came to the ecliptic. It is going to be right on the ecliptic. And now it is ready to go to the south of the ecliptic as it passes by Anuradha and now Jeshta. You see? That is that Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthayate Maitram Samshayamanniva. Now, and then what does it say? See, I'll just stop it here on 16th. There. Okay, it went further. So I have to stop it, baby. Stop. Okay, now I have to go back to 16th October. Oh, it's there. Okay, sorry. I don't know what I did. Okay. So 16 October is the first day of the war. And remember what the reference said. Vakra, and I'm going to make it smaller. Okay, so Mars is here. Okay. But so that you understand, Shravan Nakshatra is here, the Yogatara, Dhanishta is here. But let me go further and show you this Abhijit or Vega or Brahma Rashi. And if you look at the longitude of Mars here, you know what? It perfectly aligns with Abhijit. It is to the west of Dhanishta, east of Shravan. And again, Vyasadeva beautifully describes this as saying, Vakranu Vakram Krutvam Cha. After going through this Vakra Anuvakra motion, remember, it went obliquely crossed first to the north, going towards Magha. Then it did its whole retrograde motion for 6 months between Chitra and Swati. Then it crossed the ecliptic again near Jeshta Anuradha. And now it has come in the area of a Shravan. That is that Vakranu Vakram Krutvam Cha Shravane Pavaka Prabha. Mars is here. And then what did it do? It aligned itself. Brahma Rashi Samavritta, Avrutta or Samavritta, whichever you want to you do it. Okay, align itself based on the longitude along the Abhijit, along the Brahma Rashi. How beautiful. That's what we have done, these 6 references. Okay, now quickly, I'm not going to show all of this because they simply do not exist for the claimed year of Vedvir Aryaji. However, I do want to sorry, not 5-5, we have to do 3-1-6-4. Okay, because in this it's become 6-3, and watch my other videos if that's not clear to you. So when Vedviraj is saying 3-1-6-2, actually it is 3-1-6-3, at least as far as the astronomy simulation is concerned. So we are going to start again January 1st 3-1-6-2 BCE. Let me make this bigger. Notice Mars is to the south or the left of the ecliptic, and it's going to do similar motions like what I showed and claimed as Mars going oblique crossing near Magha and again for Jeshta Anuradha. However, that is not what Vedvir Aryaji is claiming in translation. He is claiming Mars is going retrograde near Magha, and then by same consistency he must have claimed Mars going retrograde near Jeshta Anuradha. Then he doesn't do that. Okay, I will ask you to take that as a homework, why he does that. There is a clear answer to it. I have given enough clues, but take this as a homework, because that will tell you how much of this stuff you are truly comprehending and truly internalizing. Okay, lot of fun, and I'll do that. I'll share more such fun when I do a again separate episode on the PurvaPaksha of his planetary evidence, when time permits. Okay, so but notice, and this is what I said during the debate. Again, you can go and watch that debate. I said, to be fair to Vedvir Aryaji, I said, let me say something that Vedvirji has not said, but if he is willing to accept my interpretation for Vakra, which he has not explicitly said anything in public or in his writing, but specifically Vakra to mean not retrograde, but Vakra to mean oblique crossing across the ecliptic, then frankly, in addition to what he is claiming, I am willing to state that his Mars also crosses obliquely and arrives at Magha, and ditto that again crosses obliquely and arrives at Anuradha Jeshta. Okay, I'm willing to say that, and you can go back and watch that debate to see where I said it. Okay, and I'm going to show a demonstration of that here. So notice Mars is to the south of the ecliptic. Okay, and sorry, let me keep it small, not that big. Okay, still to the south, Sun is crossing by. This may be a deja vu, like something similar you saw when I showed the simulation 455-61 BCE. Notice Mars is approaching the ecliptic now. Okay, now we are simulating it for Vedvir Aryaji's 3164, 3163, 3162. It has crossed the ecliptic, it has gone to the north of the ecliptic, okay, and a clear separation from the ecliptic and the first bright nakshatra star that Mars arrives at. Okay, it's a very slow crossing along the ecliptic, but I'm going to stop it, is near Magha. So Vedvir Aryaji has not accepted my translation of a Vakra to mean oblique crossing. But what I said during the debate, and I'm repeating this again, is that if he accepts that translation, then actually we can show that for his claim, he can consider 1 point plus 1 on the truth likeness score for Magha Swangarako Vakra. But for that, he has to accept his translation of Vakra equal to retrograde is wrong. Then only he can take the credit. He cannot have both. He cannot have both ways. Have a cake and eat it too. Nah, that's not how the world works. Okay. Now let's continue. Now what is the next thing? We are going to look at Mars going retrograde between Chitra and Swati. And here, if you remember, I said I'm willing to give him a benefit of doubt. Let me stop this for a second. I want to make sure that you can also see Chitra. Okay. But I said, actually, I'm willing to give him a benefit of doubt, but because as a visual observation, somebody observing may say, yeah, Mars went retrograde between Chitra and Swati. Like Dhruvam Prajuritam Goram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantere Chaiva Dishtita Parushagra. On a second thought, if somebody wants to be nitpicking, such as, let's not digress and give examples. We can give hundreds of such examples of nitpicking by other Mahabharata dating researchers just to camouflage, just to hide their own blunders. Okay. But I said, and I still stand by it, that we we can give Vedvirji a benefit of doubt and say that this retrograde of Mars is between Chitra and Swati, because we can visually see this. But if we have to use apples to apples criteria, then actually it's not between Chitra and Swati as much as it is between Hasta and Chitra, one nakshatra before, and I want you to see that. Okay, so Swati is after Chitra, by the way. The nakshatra space is further 13 degrees, but the Yoga Tara happens to be very close to Chitra. Okay, so look, it just almost came to Chitra, just slightly ahead of Chitra, still in the Chitra nakshatra. Now it is going back, okay, beyond the Yoga Tara of Hasta, almost towards Uttara Falguni, but not anywhere close to the Yoga Tara of Uttara Falguni, and it is turning backwards. You see the difference? Let me stop it for a second. Okay, this is different than what I showed for 5561 BCE, where the Mars came to Chitra, went as far as Vishakha, but not exactly close to Yogatara of Vishakha, turned back into the space of Swati and came back to Yogatara of Chitra. That explains between Chitra and Swati, but also the other reference from Udyoga Parva, where he says, Nunam Mad Bhayam Krishna Kuruna Samupastitam Visheshena hi Varshneya Chitra Pidiyate Gra. In a very peculiar, Visheshena, peculiar fashion, Mars was afflicting, torturing Chitra. And I gave the analogy of a beautiful girl and a bad boy at a bus stop, you know, in Mumbai, for example. Just imagine that scenario and you can visualize this analogy. That is not the case in case of Vedviraryaji. In fact, from Hasta it went to Chitra, maybe slightly just ahead of Chitra, and one can do the simulation and report the number. But still very much in the region of Chitra. Visually it would look like a Swati too, because there is not much distance between the Yogatara of Swati and Chitra as far as the longitude or what we call right ascension is concerned. But really the retrograde is between Chitra and Hasta and not truly Chitra and Swati. As a benefit of doubt, we can say, yeah, sure, it's between Chitra and Swati. Okay, but let's go further and now see what happens. Mars is to the left and therefore to the north of the ecliptic. Let me expand this so that you can see it better. Okay, and now we are going to see this Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana. So the Mars is coming close to the ecliptic, now right on the ecliptic. Now it is on the south of the ecliptic, and where does this happen? When this transition happens, it is near Anuradha and Jeshta. So Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthete Maitram Samshamanniva. Here, Nunam Madbhayam Krishna, that's a different story. But going Vakra, oblique crossing near Anuradha Jeshta, if Vedviraryaji accepts my definition, gives up his translation of Vakra equal to retrograde, he can score +1 there near Maga, +1 near Anuradha and Jeshta. If we give him a benefit of doubt, he can also score +1 for Dhruvam Prajvalitam Goram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantare Chaiva Dishtita Parushagra. If we don't give him a benefit of doubt, then he has to claim -1 because the retrograde is between Hasta and Chitra and not Chitra and Swati. One more thing. Even if we give him a benefit of doubt and he can claim +1 between Chitra and Swati, he cannot claim credit for Nunam Mad Bhayam Krishna Kuruna Samupastitam Visheshanahi Varshneya Chitra Pedete Gra. How specifically in a peculiar fashion it was, it meaning Mars was afflicting Chitra, is not clear in case of Vedviraryaji. It is beautifully clear in case of 5561 BCE. That beautiful girl and a bad boy at a bus stop analogy that I gave. Okay. All right. This is a long episode. You will need to watch it multiple times. So, hey, enough of entertainment, packed in one. All right. I'm going to stop at this point. Thank you very much. I will see you soon in another episode. Take this. This is not an easy to watch episode, but this is super packed with education on astronomy, on Mahabharata evidence, on Vijnana Buddhi, scientific acumen, on logical reasoning, Tarka Shastra, and even Tantra Yukti. Also, truth likeness score, how to give a benefit of doubt, how when we translate something in one way, how that translation has to be consistent across, which is a very basic requirement of any scientific work. Okay, and many more things, many more nuances that I would not able to specifically name, but they are there. Okay, I don't know if you find enjoyable watching this. I tell you, as much as it may be boring for many viewers, this is one of the episode that I would love, I would cherish. And let me make it clear, not because we did a lot of critique and criticism of translations of Vedvir Aryaji. No, in fact, let me add a word in his praise, that he is at least one of the rare few in recent times who has shown courage to include, if not all, most of the planetary evidence. Recently, I made a comment, and must have made a comment multiple times, that after my analysis of planetary evidence for all the 5 visible planets, but also 7 planets showing 3 times and so on, no other Mahabharata dating researchers dare discuss planetary evidence. After that, some funny folks have come forward. So, yes, just to show that, hey, what do you mean? I still discuss it. They discuss a cherry picked evidence, and only to show that they are still in the game. They have lost the game long time ago. Many of them are playing the game alone. But unfortunately, or I don't know, maybe fortunately, that's why we are having this manthan. Majority of our folks, I say our folks, I mean the folks who are interested in Mahabharata, that's a sufficient qualification. I'm not referring to a racial identity, I'm not referring to a national identity, a national origin, birthplace, none of that. Anyone who is interested in Mahabharata, but Mahabharata researchers, Mahabharata enthusiasts, Krishna Bhakta, you can add many people to the list, Indians in general, Hindus, whatever you want to add. Many of them are, I find, novice, many of them innocent, and many of them either do not have the luxury of spending time going into these kind of details, or those, again, unfortunately, those who have time do not have the desire. Now, that's not to say that they don't talk about Mahabharata. That's not to say that they do not discuss Mahabharata dating. However, they do not understand how much of an effort the tapasya is required to truly understand these nuances. A long episode, totally enjoyed by me making it. You let me know in your comments to what extent you found it boring, tiring, enjoyable, useful, educational, knowledgeable. You let me know. I'll see you soon in another episode. Namaskar.